like to introduce today's moderator, Michael Zioli, Director of Publisher Partner Program, Paradigm Publishing Services. And I'm going to hand over the floor to Mike, who is going to introduce the rest of our speakers. So, Mike, the floor is all yours.
All right, thank you very much, Anne. Thank you for joining. We've got an amazing panel today. This is our kickoff webinar, Meet the Press webinar for 2024. We've got two publishers from Canada and two publishers from the UK. They'll talk about their own publishing, but also about the publishing in their regions, and hopefully speak for some of their colleagues. And I see that among attendees, there are also some colleagues. Again, this is being run as a meeting. So if you have a question, you want to make a comment, turn on your camera and speak up. We're not going to stick to ceremony here. We want it to be more of a discussion than a presentation. One of the things I'd like to point out here is that these are publishers that are from the edges more so than from the center of their regions. And can I get the next slide, please?
Sure, just one. Oh, there we go.
Okay. So we have the University of British Columbia Press and the University of Manitoba Press. The University of British Columbia is on the West Coast, so more west facing, not facing towards Europe, and you'll see that reflected in their publishing. Manitoba is from the center of the Canadian Empire and dealing with issues that are native there. We've added ACUP, the Association of Canadian University Presses, over the past year to the Gruyter platform. There's 17 university presses. From the UK, we've added 6 presses, most of them from the past year, but a few have been partners a little bit longer. So we're trying to take what we're calling a regional approach. We think there's sense and a reason to present those presses to libraries in that way. And can I get the next slide? Okay, I wanted to put a little bit of a face to this. Since we don't do PowerPoints in these panels, we want it to be discussion. I did want to show a few book jackets that I think in one way or another represent something of the presses. As I said, these are presses from the edges, I think, of their regions. I think of Manchester as a very edgy press, and I think Simon Ross will say that about their publishing. So here you have a May 1st, 2020 poster on the cover of their last catalog, showing the Subotnik, or voluntary work of laborers on weekends for no pay, and the entangled legacies of empire. I think Simon will have comments on being in Manchester rather than in London. How does that impact their perspective? University of Manitoba in the prairies of Canada obviously will deal a lot with Indigenous peoples, which I think has a global audience. And I also put as a counterpoint here to the Manchester titles, Laughing at Empire, which is about Asian Canadian voices and diverse voices. And I'll let David Larson talk more about that. Next slide, please, Anne. Whoops. And there's the University of British Columbia Press. Again, some of their titles that are east facing, and issues there, which I'll leave to Melissa to go into. And a topic that I think affects everybody globally are refugees. It's certainly a big topic here in the US, and the struggle they're having with Canada in terms of laws and admission to Canada. And last but not least is Boydell and Brewer, which is not a university press, although they are
on for about an hour.
They are employee owned, and they publish fantastic stuff. They have a very complicated history, I think, but it's one of the best publishers out there that's associated with university presses and yet is not a university press. There are a few like that. Lynn Reiner, Berghan books would be a couple of others that fall into that category. So with that, I'm going to pass this over to Simon Ross from Manchester University Press and have him start off by giving us a few minutes talk about Manchester.
Thank you, Michael. As Michael had mentioned, we're based in Manchester. The sun is now set. It's dark here, but Manchester is not London, and it's a very important point to make because there's it for those of you who know the UK, and probably you do. There's always been a sort of a north-south divide, and the the Manchester has become something of a sort of an emblematic city for um, things that can be done, I think, in the UK as well, if not better than in the south. And even though it's not officially the second city, I think it is culturally has an influence that way beyond its side. So it's a huge cultural centre within the Northwest and actually for the North. And actually, Manchester University Press is in fact the largest publisher in the North. I'll get back to that. But it's a very vibrant region. It's a cultural centre. And Manchester University Press is part of actually one of the largest research intensive universities in the UK, getting on for 50,000 students, and that's probably nearly as big as both Oxford and Cambridge combined. So it's a huge research university, and it's very important for the region. And the region itself has a history of radicalism. It's where Engels spent some 30 years of his life running mills and making comments on the working class conditions of the Greater Manchester area. And his great friend, soon to become great friend, Karl Marx, visited him many times. It's the home of the suffragettes. It's where the atom was split by Rutherford, and it's the birthplace of modern computing because Alan Turing was here with the original baby computer, and that many other things. So it is an important and well-established university celebrating 200 years this year. And in fact, it's Manchester University Press's 120th year of existence. We were founded in 1904. So I don't think we've had many directors at the press, but I think I might be the fifth or something. We had some very long-running ones before that. So the press itself is, as I say, well established. It's always been a publisher looking at the international market, but with a very strong affiliation to its region. So we do local publishing, but most of our output is for the international market. In fact, over 50% of our authors are from outside of the UK. We worked out, like many university presses, we probably publish less than 10% of our home authors, those based at the University of Manchester or in the Manchester region. We publish around 250 books a year, which makes us a sort of medium-size university press, maybe slightly larger in the UK. And I also looked at the performance of our books in terms of the amount of nominations and awards that they're shortlisted for or win prizes and so on in their specialist areas. And in some years, we've had as many as 25% of our output nominated, shortlisted, or winning an award. So we tend to publish quite high impact titles. Certainly by that statistic. I do believe that we do try to continue in that radical tradition by publishing diverse voices and looking at the balance of what we publish. For example, the gender mix in editorial edited collections, and from our reviewer base. That's notoriously difficult to monitor really effectively, but we are aware of it and we do respond to it. And it's very much part of what our home institution, the University of Manchester, is very focused on, which is that one of their three key strands of their mission is towards social responsibility in its broadest form. So in terms of where we think we are well established in terms of our publishing profile, we have broadly history is an area that we have a long tradition of publishing in and some strengths. There are two immediate standout series that you may have heard of, or if you haven't, you probably should have. One is to do with empire, actually. It's called Studies in Imperialism. And the other one is from art history, Rethinking Art Histories, which is a very well-established and well-regarded series. So broadly, art history, museums, and material culture are a strength of ours, as well as social and cultural history, more contemporary topics and gender, race, work and leisure, and so on. We also have a very strong and wide-ranging publications in literature, theatre, TV, and film, from medieval literature, not medieval TV, obviously, to early modern and contemporary literature, and a wide range of TV and film coverage. And also we have a strong list in music, and this is partly to do with the fact that Manchester is a producer of very fine musical traditions, but it's also the home of the British Pop Archive, which is part of the John Rylands Library, which is one of the biggest research libraries in the UK. And we publish with them and also on topics around them. In terms of other areas, we have small but growing influence in law and in international relations, and also history of medicine, history of science, and areas like that. But more recently, we've also had to respond to the demands of both policy and our author base by growing our open access output. On average, our output, if you looked at 250 titles, we're doing about between 10 and 15% of our output is open access, and that's likely to be growing because of the policy changes within the UK. But the other area we've expanded into is more crossover books, or books that we want to sell through the retail trade for the general public. And we've had quite a lot of success with that. And again, about 10 to 15% of our output is in that. And because we're talking about books, I'm going to show you a few covers that I hope you can see. So for example, these are more topic-based than subject-based, I would say, but around sustainability, climate change, diverse voices and things. But this is a very successful book, The Value of the Whale. And the subtitle is On the Illusions of Green Capitalism, so you can work out what that's about. But it's been a tremendous seller for us over the last couple of years. We've done books on other books. This is perhaps a more academic treatment on a sustainable topic. This is Carbon Colonialism. This is about rich countries dumping their rubbish on poor countries, also up for a prize. This is actually for our creative writing audience, but is also crossover potential crafting crime fiction. We also had a lot of success with a book on writing fantasy fiction called Fantasy Fiction Formula, which you might be aware of. And here's we branched out into some science publishing. This won the British Psychological Book of the Year prize this year, and it's by a neuroscientist, and it's about that feeling of presence and otherness that people have, and it's actually about mental illness and related topics. But so we've expanded our reach to fulfill our mission, because we believe that actually putting books into the general public, or at least the informed and curious general public, is also a way of fulfilling our mission. And it's also a way of attracting authors, of course, both academic and general authors. So I think that's probably my 5 minutes, Michael.
Let me unmute. Thank you very much, Simon. That was great. And let's pass this over to David Larson from the University of Manitoba Press.
Thank you, Michael. So David Larson, University of Manitoba Press, speaking to you from Winnipeg. in the heart of the continent. If we're starting at this point and speaking of where we are, I'd like to acknowledge the fact that we work from and share our stories from the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dene, and Dakota peoples, and also the homeland of the Métis Nation. And I really do like to see Winnipeg as being more than just the center of Canada, which is something I could speak to a bit, but as a center of the continent. And we're in a unique position here as someone who's come to Winnipeg as an adult, but been here for the largest share of my life. I recognize that we do have a very unique culture here in Winnipeg. Although in Canada, we tend to see things east and west, there's a sort of a balance point here that I think we have our finger on in Winnipeg. University of Manitoba Press is the oldest press in Western Canada. We were founded in 1967, so been publishing now for better than 50 years. Our list has become more academic and scholarly over the years. For many years, the core of our titles were more focused on trade, which was in part of our, our dependence upon sales revenue, quite frankly, and ensuring that we were selling as many books as we possibly could and reaching the broadest audience as we could. But over the decades, we have been moving more and more into the scholarly market, and our press is best known for, and our focus has been in the area of Indigenous studies. One of our series, Critical Studies in Native History, is really foundational to the field in Canada. One of the books that Michael had shown earlier, National Crime, again, a foundational text in the area of looking at residential schools and their impact on Indigenous populations and the importance. And at that time, really an undiscussed part of Canadian history. The Indigenous Studies list has allowed us also, I think it's really important to see things this way, extend into other areas that are also of interest to the press that we're growing in, which is gender studies. We've done a number of books on Indigenous masculinities over the years, and also critical food studies, studies around food security, challenges in the North. A recent book of ours called Plundering the North looks at complicity between corporates and government agencies in food insecurity in the North. But it's been following the scholars in the field of Indigenous studies has allowed us to and enabled us to move into these other areas, as I said, that are of increasing value or importance to our press, notably environmental studies, food studies, and gender studies. The press also has a long-standing commitment to immigration and culture with a series in that area, which is being redesigned at this time to better tell the story of refugees and the refugee experience throughout the globe, and also it ties into work that we're doing now in human rights and social justice. I think that probably summarizes what we do at the press and where I'm calling from.
Thanks very much, David. Right, I'll have another comment. I'll let Melissa go first, though, to talk about University of British Columbia. But suffice it to say that your titles have a reach and audience well beyond Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Ontario, into the Southern Hemisphere. More on that. Melissa?
Okay, thank you, Michael. And thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate your interest. To begin, I just say that UBC Press is located on the ancestral and the unceded territory of the Musqueam Nation. And Musqueam people, if you're familiar at all with the geography of British Columbia, which I don't presume you are, but we're located close to the estuary of the Fraser River, and the Musqueam people have been stewards of this land for thousands of years. So we're grateful to live and work on this territory. UBC itself, just picking up on Simon's description of Manchester, UBC is also, it's a large research-focused university. Its enrollment is roughly 72,000 students. 60,000 of them are at the main campus, which is, which is sort of at the very end of Vancouver, it seems, overlooking the ocean, and about 11,500 are in more centrally located in BC in the Okanagan. UBC Press itself was similar to Manitoba, was just past we just had our 50th anniversary. It's a little bit about whether it should have been our 51st or 52nd. The records are a little fuzzy. The press started off not as a book publisher, but certainly became, very focused regionally in its publishing program. So let's just say 50 years. And it is, we publish about 50 books a year, and almost exclusively in the social sciences, depending on how you define history. So the press has had a long time focus, I'd say, probably for about the last 35 years in publishing in Indigenous studies. And that includes Indigenous history, Aboriginal law and title, sometimes comparatively, actually, with Australia, New Zealand, and other some northern nations as well. The political and cultural rights and autonomy of Indigenous peoples, and Indigenous leadership, just to give you a few examples. And this has not always been the case. For a long time, books were written about Indigenous people, but now the focus of the list is books that are written by Indigenous people and scholars and communities. So I would say Indigenous studies comprises roughly 20 to 30% of our list in any given season. But we also publish in urban planning, and that is quite an international list. We also publish in Asian studies, and just to harken to what the book that Michael displayed in the slide. And we do have a series in contemporary Chinese studies as well that's well regarded and attracts some very senior scholars globally. So we're very pleased with that series. We publish in gender and sexuality, in sociology, in political science, and I would say that that list is primarily pretty Canadian focused. Environmental history, and we have a series called Nature, History, and Society, which is really quite renowned, not only for the focus, but also for the methodology that the scholars bring to exploring and essentially, I think, help creating the field of environmental history more broadly. And of course, we publish in law, natural history, human rights, and also focus on immigration and transnationalism. It's about 15% of our list varies year to year. The books are written by first-time emerging scholars. And so we're really focused on building that relationship. Our authors are our greatest asset. We learn the most from them. And we find that they really push the boundaries of their own disciplines, and they certainly do push us as a publisher. And we're grateful for that. And we learn, as I said, we learn a lot from them. We have a 17 series, so I invite you to look at our website and check out those series. And over 85% of the books we produce, and I would say 100% up until recently, have been, our scholarly peer-reviewed works, and the peer review process, like all of our colleagues, is a rigorous one. But recently, about 2016, we launched a trade imprint called On Point Press, which is to expand our reading audience beyond the academy, and also to sort of amplify some of the themes and subjects that we're seeing in our scholarly list. And then we also have another imprint called Purge Books, which focuses on professional, practitioner, and community audiences. And then finally, a small series that's just starting to do well, which is called On Campus, which is designed to support faculty, students, and staff and administrators on university campuses to help them manage the demand of university life. And those that series that was conceived of as open access to begin with. So their books are available for free downloads. I would say that really proud of all of the people who work at UBC Press. They're committed professionals. They design beautiful books. They are rigorous in the editorial focus. So our books win awards. They win design awards and accolades in Canada and globally. And I'd just like to highlight as well that there's been quite a bit of focus at UBC Press on accessibility. We have an accessibility committee. So we're one of the first university presses in Canada to be Benetech certified. We provide excellent alt text guidelines for our authors. You're welcome to come and copy those guidelines if you wish to. And our authors have responded in kind, and we're very pleased and grateful for their understanding and take up of that. And that we thrive on partnerships. You know, we publish with associations, we publish with museums, we buy and sell rights from our colleague presses around the world. We do translations. So we're really trying to, you know, we're quite sort of broad in scope, focused on our region and on Canada and on specific, about 16 very clear specific editorial subject areas. So I just would like to say that we're really happy to be working with De Gruyter and proud to be part of the collective with our Canadian colleagues, whose publishing programs are excellent and very exciting, and that this is our first foray into DRM-free publishing. So there's trepidation and there's great hope. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Melissa. We'll talk about ACUP, the Association of Canadian University Presses, after we hear from Anche King. I've already got a bunch of questions, and I'm sure people here do as well. But Anche, why don't you tell us a bit about Boydell and Brewer?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm Anche King, the Sales and Marketing Director at Boydell and Brewer. And I'm really happy to be here among all these friendly faces and colleagues. So it's great to be part of this collective. I wanted to give you a bit of a flavor about our rich history as a publisher. So we are a mission-based publisher of scholarly works, and our head office is in Suffolk in England, which is not in London. And we have also an office in Rochester in New York, and we publish there with as a university press in partnership with the University of Rochester. We've always been independent, and we became employee-owned in 2015. And you might know Richard Fisher, the academic and policy correspondent of the IPG in the UK, and he recently joined us as our trust's chair. We were founded 55 years ago by two British medieval scholars. One of them was Derek Brewer, one of the most recognized Chaucer scholars of modern times. He taught in Tokyo, Japan for a couple of years and was master of Emmanuel College in Cambridge, UK for a couple of decades, where he was instrumental in allowing the admission of female students for the first time. The other was Richard Barber, who's a renowned authority on Arthurian legend. He founded the Boydell Press and later merged it with D.S. Brewer to form Boydell and Brewer. But over the last years, our business has grown substantially. We now publish over 200 books a year and have over 6,000 in print. 3,500 of those are available as ebooks. The majority of our titles are high quality, peer-reviewed academic monographs. We do have a small list of trade titles as well, though. I want to give you a bit more of detail about our imprints and subject areas that we cover. So the core of our publishing, almost half of our output, is medieval history and literature, which is where we started out with Boydell Press and D.S. Brewer. And then over the years, we've added York Medieval Press, which has now reached 100 titles, and most recently a partnership with Durham University's Institute of Medieval and Early Modern Studies, a bit of a mouthful. They're covering early modern history, religious studies, and history of science as well. The second largest subject area is our music list. Boydell Press in the UK is one of the most significant publishers of music titles among CUP and OUP. And in the US, we publish out of the internationally renowned Eastman Studies of Music series, which is edited by Ralph Locke. The Eastman School of Music, by the way, was founded by industrialist and Kodak founder George Eastman in 1921 and is an award-winning school, Sam Adler being one of their most famous connections there. But alongside the monographs, we also publish many books for practitioners and conservatoires. Next, I wanted to mention the publishing we do around regional studies. We are committed to publishing authors both based in and writing about the global South. the scholarship of which is underrepresented in Western academia. So 3 imprints support this mission. Firstly is Tamasis, which covers Hispanic studies, including books from and about Latin America. Tamasis is the Latin word for Thames, as the founders, who were both academics, were based in London, overlooking the River Thames when they decided on a name for their imprint. Then there is the James Curry Press, which is the preeminent African studies publishing program. It was founded by James Curry, the man, who published the Africa Right series when he was at Heinemann, which is incidentally still going strong today. The best-selling title is Decolonizing the Mind by Gugi, and most recently we published the 2-volume set on the African Charter of Human and People's Rights, which is a landmark study on one of the most important documents in modern African history. And thirdly, we are delighted to have partnered with the leading Indian academic publisher Manohar to boost the global visibility of Indian scholarship and research. The first co-published titles are just coming out now under the brand new Boydell Manohar imprint. So with these lists, we're also expanding into broader areas on the social sciences, for example, economic history, politics, anthropology, and ethnomusicology. So moving on to our US-based publishing, we have 2 cornerstones there. We publish in German studies, which is literature, film, and history from our Camden House imprint. The best-selling textbook there is The Critical History of German Film. And the other comes from the University of Rochester Press, which was founded in 1989 in partnership with the University of Rochester. I already mentioned the prestigious Eastman School of Music series, and further there is the Eastern European Studies series, which is edited by the famous historian Timothy Snyder, the author of Bloodlands. We also cover history of medicine and, of course, African studies, with a recent new title called Decolonizing African Studies by Toyin Falola. On other subjects that we cover across the variety of our imprints is maritime history, 18th century, early modern and modern history, film, theatre, performance, Jewish studies, Renaissance literature, and art and architecture. So lastly, I'd like to mention our partnership program. We distribute for about 30 societies and other publishers, mostly in the areas of history or literature, as in the yearbook of the Brecht Society. We are encouraging our partner publishers to make ebooks available as well. And recently, when we published the latest edition of the History of Parliament set, which is in 9 volumes, it has been made available as ebooks for the very first time. So in summary, we offer a unique combination of independent and university press publishing. We have a long history of quality, peer-reviewed, award-winning content. We cover a wide area of the humanities and social sciences. We partner with a large number of publishers and societies and have a global approach to publishing and making digital our priority. We have a rapidly growing open access program, including our Knowledge Unlatched involvement, and it is a strategic priority for us. And finally, our strategic plan is one of growth. We have invested in additional editorial resources to ensure we can publish more and broaden our scope. So that's it for a quick overview, and I look forward to your questions later. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Antje. Before I jump in and take over once again, let me put it out to the floor here. This is a meeting format, so you're all welcome to turn on your camera or not, and turn off your mute and speak if you have questions. Charlie, you had a question in the chat. Do you want to follow up on that or ask another?
Sure, yeah. I was just wondering, this is Charlie Remy from Dartmouth,
Thank you.
about your relationship with the University of Rochester Press. And then also I had another question about this, and I can't remember the name of the new De Gruyter OA initiative. But I'd like to know what the selection criteria is going to be for each press to select titles to be open access.
We can put that to each of you.
Shall I start with the University of Rochester question?
Sure, go ahead, Antje.
Yeah, so it's a partnership, so it's not an imprint. So we are working together with the university has its own editorial board who approve the title. So on top of the peer review and our own editorial process we go through, the university's editorial board also approves the titles and gives their submission. And in terms of open access, are you asking in general, or are you asking regards specifically the Gruyter?
Let's keep it
initiative?
general for now. We also have Peter Potter on the call, who's the vice president for our open access program, but that's brand new. And why don't we keep it first general and hear about how you select titles to be open access generally.
So really, I think a lot of it comes down to funding. To be perfectly honest, we are an independent commercial business. So if a scholar comes with funding that can support open access, then that enables us to make that scholarship available to a much broader audience by making it open access. And we have we have the James Curry imprint and the one of the University of Rochester Press imprints, where we encourage more open access publishing, because we do have that that ethical I'm losing the word now. We're trying to make this research available to the global south, to everybody in the world that is interested, and the normal retail prices are just prohibitive. So the more open access we can publish in those areas of study, the more we can make our research available.
Melissa, David, Simon, do you want to talk about how you select open access titles?
Yeah, I can make a few comments about this. I think firstly, well, with respect to Gruyter, when we first started to talk about this, we were going to only consider those titles which were consistent with the Sustainable Development Goals. And that's actually a strategy that we already use within Manchester University Press, and that's partly because of other funders of open access have requested similar things. For example, Knowledge Unlatched focused on things like global health and climate change and so on. So in theory, every monograph is eligible within those areas. And similar with Angé. I mean, if a book comes with funding, of course, that makes it immediately eligible for an open access title, but not everyone does. And so what we would probably do is to prioritize those books that would find it very hard to get open access funding. So we also go to our home institution, the university, who also funds some of our open access publishing. They will by default fund a University of Manchester author, but we can also request funding for other authors that want to have their book published open access but do not have access to funds, either by a research funder or otherwise. So, but as always with these things, it depends. I mean, we have a top-down strategy, but there are individual cases which we look at.
Melissa, David, do you want to build on that?
I'll just add that yeah, open access is a pretty minimal part of our list at the moment, and similar to Antje, it involves scholars having money built into their research funding to begin with to make a book open access. And this is aside from that very small series that I mentioned previously on campus. But the Social Science Humanities Research Council of Canada, and this sort of harkens, I think, to what Simon was saying, is requiring a phase-in of a percentage of our publications to be open access. I think it's 5% one year, 10% the next, or 15%. I should know this, but I'm just trying to figure that out. But in any case, we will have to reach a 20% threshold, I think, in about 3 years. So how we're going to decide in-house that focus of where that open access, those decisions about which books or which disciplines or subject areas, we are just starting now to grapple with and think about.
Our situation's similar to what you've heard from others as well. And I just want to pick up on the point that Melissa's just raised. Also, the aid to scholarly publishing is moving more of its subventions over to the commitment to open access. And as the years go on, that will be an increasing number. So we'll see more of our titles become open access for that. From that program, we do presently have one coming through right now that does, and we have received funding from the University of Manitoba libraries to assist with the open access publishing of 3 additional titles. So they're not a lot of titles, but it is an area that we are committed to, recognizing that what we really value is the most broad dissemination of scholarship as possible. And also, we're committed to accessibility and reaching folks. A point that Anshey had brought up earlier about pricing, I think speaks to that as well. University of Manitoba Press has always kept its prices low. I know UBC does as well, but it's always been a commitment of ours to ensure that we can reach the broadest audience as possible. We've also placed some of our backlists, not much, I don't want to overstate it, but we have placed backlist on for open access, usually at the request of the authors. We are very mindful of what their needs and desires are. And we've also had a few titles that were born digital without any intention of printing them, but were books that were available open access and in digital format as well, or only.
Thanks very much. Conscious of time here, we have about 19 minutes left. So I don't want to use the remaining 15 minutes or so on this. But suffice to say, we will be having an open access webinar. I'm not exactly sure of the date, but a month or so from now, we'll be talking specifically about the de Gruyter model, which is currently funded, and books will be forthcoming from that in a variety of ways. One thing I would like to ask here myself is about perspectives. We've heard a lot about what you're publishing, and I guess I would go to the variety of perspectives that you're either seeking or being forced to seek. How do those come about? I'm talking about the non-European white male heterosexual point of view on whatever the topic is. It seems that that's got to be a key element in your editorial processes. Is that right? Or any one of you can jump in and start.
Well, I would say that it's an issue that hits every industry, and it's prevalent throughout most developed societies. So we have within our home institution, there's a very strong social responsibility element. So this is driven through every activity within the university, and that includes the university press. And the university press is in fact a department of the university, and it is administered ultimately and governed by the university. So we're subject to the same employment rules and so on and so forth. So where we can be most effective is in the diversity of our hiring, and then after that in the diversity of our peer review, which is really quite difficult in certain areas. Let's talk about medieval history. It's quite difficult to find a diverse set of peer reviews, but we do. We do try, and this will change over time. And as I mentioned in the introduction to MUP, we pay attention to where our authors are based, the gender mix, and so on. This is quite difficult to track, and it's not always clear, that you're allocating people into the right categories, if you like. So the problems are we have rules around data protection, and and short of being very intrusive and asking authors and people you work with to fill in very detailed and quite personal questionnaires, it really is quite difficult to know how effective you're being in this. But I think that having a general awareness, that includes training and so on, it will help this issue.
If I could just add to that, I totally agree with everything you're saying, Simon. And there's one thing having a mission statement to say that you want to be diverse and inclusive, and there's another to make that happen in practice. And to want to have a diverse authorship and staff from diverse backgrounds is one thing, but actually ensuring that this is becoming a reality is much harder. So all I can say at this point is that we're trying very hard to recruit people from diverse backgrounds and recruit authors and make sure that our research comes from all over the world and not just from the West. So but by making that our mission, I think hopefully over time we'll grow this the space of diversity.
I would just add, every annually there's the Congress of the Social Sciences and Humanities in Canada. It's a large 8-9 day academic gathering of the various associations across the social sciences and humanities, and about 10,000 scholars attend each year. So it's a great opportunity for scholarly publishers, and we really enjoy it. And I'd say last year we just saw, it was like a generational change in terms of who we saw coming to the booth, picking up books, proposals being presented, and so on. It was remarkable because we haven't met in person since prior to the pandemic, and it was really really exciting and noticeable. So we also are part of the university that has its inclusion action plan, Indigenous strategic plan, and so on. And so that's part of the work that we do as a publisher, and to ensure that our peer reviewers are, our board is diverse, our peer reviewers, our staff where that's possible, and also just the areas in which we publish. So I would say just a bit of a shout out for contributed volumes as a way of really starting to bring in the voices of emerging scholars who maybe aren't at a full monograph point in their careers at this, but nonetheless we're seeing incredible diversity of voices in our contributed volumes, and glad for that.
Yeah, I can echo everything that's been said so far, and I just wanted to add that when we reviewed our list, looking at these very questions, we were not surprised and gratified to see that there was extremely diverse. And I think what that allows us to do is not rest on our laurels or think that we've got our job done, but to really sort of leverage the strengths and the relationships that we have developed to be able to continue that forward development of a more diverse list. And it is something that we are certainly committed to. And also the point that was just raised by Melissa, I agree. Last year at Congress, it was an incredibly diverse group of young scholars, which is part of it also. I mean, our list does skew towards early career scholars. We certainly have our mid and late career scholars, and we're finding that just the people that are attracted to the press and the scholarship we're attracted to, we're finding that diversity within the list.
De Gruyter obviously has these same issues, and we attended that same Congress in Canada last year and found it a good use of our time. I notice scanning who's here in the audience. I see a lot of librarians that I know: Alicia at Brock, Rob Thiessen at Calgary, Karen Griever, Kenyon College in Ohio, as well as Charlie at Dartmouth. And I see a bunch of publishers there: Trond from University of Hawaii Press, Vanessa from Amsterdam University Press, Charlotte from Edinburgh University Press, Krista from University of Chicago Press, Joe Grieg from Bristol University Press. This is an amazing group of people. Please speak up. I do have a question if you don't want to jump in, but I really don't want to dominate the entire conversation. Rob, I see you turned on your camera. Are you going to? I think you're on mute.
I don't
There.
have a question. I just thought I'd show my face, but I've just been learning a lot. So go ahead and go ahead and speak, Michael.
All right. Well, I'll throw this out, and Charlotte and Joe and anyone else, Trond, who cares to speak, jump in. One of the things I think we share, both on the library side of this and the publisher side, is that you've got this thick undergrowth of vendors, or thick vendors in the undergrowth, but who keep you apart. That is, you talk with us, we talk to the libraries, and then the libraries talk to us, and then we convey that back to you. It's a complex ecosystem, and I wonder how you get your feedback from each other. That is, on the library side, how are you getting your feedback directly, or information from publishers? And to the publishers, how are you getting that direct feedback from libraries about what you're publishing, or do you? Looking for a volunteer to jump in, either on the publisher or library side.
Yeah, so I would actually very much welcome feedback from the librarians on the call, because we have just launched an initiative to do some interviews with librarians and to get feedback directly from them. And it's not that easy to get people to come and talk to us. So I would very much hope that we can have a closer conversation directly with librarians. But you know, how do we make those connections? So far we've tried through our authors, who are obviously deeply embedded in their institutions, and most of them will know their librarian. But if there's a quicker, directer way to talk to you, then I would welcome that.
I think I see Joe Grieg from Bristol and Charlotte Mason from Edinburgh. I know you're both very interested in that as well.
Yeah, we are. I've just typed a message. I mean, we find those two big conferences, Charleston and the UKSG, absolutely crucial for library feedback. But we also have a library advisory board who we use for big questions. So we set it up about 2 years ago, and we have about 12 people internationally from there who are brill for us when we have a quick question we need to go and ask. So that kind of big picture stuff and the themes and the conversations. And I find those two conferences, I mean, librarians love a chat, as you well know, and we love hearing from them, but they're really, really open to having a natter and getting involved, and really keen to share their thoughts about how we can improve communication. And we've had about 1,000 people, librarians, sign up to our newsletter this last year, which was quite an incredible number. So we're obviously saying something right. But those three ways where we hear from librarians.
I'd echo that as well from us at Edinburgh as well. But we also really value opportunities like this, and working with De Gruyter, because we feel that we work with lots of different partners, third parties, reps, agents, and we do really appreciate the fact that De Gruyter help enable these kind of conversations, and through Michael and the team, we've had so many more meaningful conversations with the librarians in North America, certainly, and it's some of those really meaningful discussions have really kind of helped shape some of the decisions we're making, and how we do things. So we just want to have more of those. So thanks.
Anyone on the library side care to jump in? Oh, there's so many of you out there, but okay.
No, I'll just say that I found Charleston to be a great place to talk to people. And while there are fewer presses there, for me as a Canadian, going to the Super Conference in Toronto has been a very handy place to connect with publishers as well. So but venues like this, conferences, sometimes on a Canadian scene, CRCan is good for that as well. So it depends.
One of the things that I think is, I hope is unique about Gruyter is we like to be very transparent and facilitate these kinds of meetings. And before the pandemic, we did it twice a year. Then it became virtual when we could do it. We hope to be getting back to live meetings soon. We had a smaller one in Boston in the fall, but we think these are very valuable to share perspectives. Looking at my watch here, we're getting down to the end. And one of the questions I always have, and I never ask it, so I'm going to ask it now, is, and this is for librarians and for publishers, what is it that you would like the other side to know that you think they may not be fully aware of? So I don't know, Melissa, could I toss that hot potato to you first?
That they might not be aware of, boy. I think, I think this is true for all of us. Well, I will speak for UBC Press. It's just the complexity of what goes on in working with authors, creating publications, and finding ways to share them. It's a very complex and sort of that interplay is I think it's more complex than it was, in the sense of how digital books work, different models come together, how they reach different audiences, what's suitable in one environment or through one sales channel or for one reader is not going to work so well in another capacity. So I just see, the everybody working at UBC Press just working really hard to try to figure that out. And I think that's a lot of behind the scenes work. It's a lot of data work. It's a lot of metadata, a lot of back and forth with authors about representing things properly and so on. And we try to make it seamless and invisible, because that's good for us and it's good for our authors that happens. But it is quite a process. And I'm sure that's true on the library side as well. Yeah.
There's a good comment in the chat section from Ruth about the changing nature of the big research libraries. I don't know if everyone can read it, but that's really useful feedback about there are less and less collection development librarians and less time to look at individual publishers, let alone individual titles. And saying that newsletters are useful and updates and so on. So I'll certainly take that as useful feedback.
Thank you, Ruth, and Robinson has just put a comment in. Do you know, you're all from different geographic regions, and we're talking to a lot of North American librarians here. How do you think about geography in your publishing? Simon, do you want to continue?
Oh, how do we think about geography?
Well, so one of the reasons when we talked about working together was you didn't feel you were reaching the North American libraries as well as you did.
So one of the problems that the Manchester University Press has is it's not called Oxford or Cambridge. So your name recognition in North America is not as high yet. Certainly as a research university, we can hold our head up high. As a press, obviously, we're not as big. There are other issues. I think for some reason, I mean, if the US were more football crazy, I think we might have more name recognition. So that's helping. I didn't mention the fact that, of course, obviously Manchester is a huge footballing city, but we don't really publish that much on the sports side. So having get together with a collection of similar sized and actually similar profile university presses gives us an opportunity to at least get in the conversation. And hopefully these sorts of events will help to inform people a little bit more about Manchester, not just as a regional publisher, because I think it's less about being publishing on the edge and more about recentering and rebalancing where that focus should be. Because I think, you know, there are presses, I would say about like Manchester that are publishing books that compete with the other big university presses. Yet we have very few opportunities to get our profile in the conversation. And that's partly because we have, like lots of university presses, have very small sales forces and relatively small marketing teams. So, you know, we put a lot of our resources, as Melissa was saying, into actually the author relationship. And you know, book publishing is very intensive. It's not as it's not the factory of journal publishing. Each book is unique. Each relationship is unique. We spend a lot of time, as other of my colleagues have said, with early career researchers, helping them get their first books published and everything. Obviously in the hope that they'll come back and publish their bigger second book with you, but it's also part of what we do. You know, it's how you support the academic community. And you know, so our resources are limited. So this kind of activities is very useful for us.
Simon, I think that will be the last word. We're at time now, but I'd like to just mention to everybody on the call that De Gruyter is running its trials now. So if you'd like to trial University of British Columbia Press or Manchester University Press or University of Manitoba Press or Boydell and Brewer, you should look for our material. We'll attach that to the follow-up of our meeting next week so that you can easily find where that trial lives. And we do hope you'll take the opportunity to run that trial and see how these books are accepted by your patrons. Thank you very much for attending. And thanks to our panelists.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, fellow panelists.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.